Hello. Okay, it's me again. Your favorite. I know you miss me. Okay, so I told you that you could get back online. You can play this second tape if you want. I am currently uploading the other one. Cross your fingers that my 40, 50-minute one goes through and uploads so that maybe we've got the problem solved and all this stuff is good, and I'll make some more obvious and weird hand gestures. Okay. So I'm gonna, after I adjust here, I'm gonna do another like 15 minutes or so. I'm gonna look at the clock and see if I can do another 15-minute lecture on, I know this is gonna sound weird, you guys, but you should be accustomed to kind of weirdness on my part because you know how I love this stuff. And this next part, I think it's my favorite part. That's really weird. But I think it's really interesting because without this next piece, a lot of stuff would have happened and you would be exposed to a lot of nasty business that you aren't exposed to now. And it's kind of a fascinating little clause in the Fifth Amendment. So let's just get right down to it, and I'll tell you what I'm talking about. So if you get out your handy dandy Bill of Rights, of course, pocket Constitution. Thank you very much to Anna Arnold. This is actually given to me by a student. Yeah, that's right. Some students know how to suck up. They give their teachers pocket constitutions. Okay, maybe it's because her dad's teacher that Anna knew how to suck up to me. Okay, so here is the next part that I want to talk about. So if we go back and we kind of just look through, no person shall be held to answer for a capital or otherwise infamous crime, ... nor shall be compelled in any criminal case to be a witness against himself, Miranda, right? Nor be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. Due process of law. These words, these four very simple words are so valuable, so valuable. When Madison put these words in here, the thing that's kind of amazing about them is that they became so powerful and so popular that they have been repeatedly added to other amendments and other pieces of legislation to do exactly what they did in the Fifth. In the Fifth Amendment, people are given this umbrella protection of the due process clause. And it's used a lot to give that same sort of umbrella protection. And the courts see due process as, again, a bit of an umbrella. But let's talk about what that means, okay? So due process of law. So due, and we've talked about this a little bit before. So due, it's what you're due. It doesn't, it means like what you are owed, okay? So due process. So due what's owed to you, what is fair, process under the law. So when people say that, or when the courts say, or when the Constitution says, or when James Madison says, hey, baby, you can't be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, essentially what he's saying is you are entitled to fundamental fairness. Due process means fundamental fairness. And I feel like I've said this to you guys before, so if I'm repeating myself, just bear with me. But fundamental fairness is the way that the system should work. It means that, you know, people should be treated fairly. And so when I say it's an umbrella clause, it's because, okay, that's a big idea, that people should fundamentally be treated fair by the system. Well, that means a lot of things. So that's why it's kind of looked at as a catch-all, kind of a net under which a lot of other things that aren't like articulated specifically within the Constitution are placed. It's, again, used to prevent some of the abuses of power that the framers were really worried about. They were really worried that this perfect, gorgeous structure that they had created, it was the reason, revisit that earlier series of lectures when I talked about Madison's worry. The thing that kept him awake at night while they were writing that Constitution was that they had created a beautiful monster. This system that was so great, that was going to be so strong and so powerful that it would essentially crush and grind to powder the individuals who try to exist within it. And so due process is like an omega-3 boost to the civil liberty muscles that individuals got from the Bill of Rights. I mean, it was the juice, baby, that people got. It was intended to protect people from abuses and sort of abuses of fairness within the system, because essentially the system is supposed to be fair. I mean, you might not, life isn't always fair. Like, I'm not always fair as a teacher. Kids are always thinking I'm not fair. Well, it's not. I had it happen today, right? Like, I had a student say, well, that's not fair because she got an extra credit opportunity that I didn't get. And what I always say to kids is, like, well, things don't always seem fair, but, you know, we design the system so that it at least has the attempt to be fair. And, you know, honestly, she did have the same extra credit opportunity. It was just that the other student took the opportunity, she didn't, and she wanted an extension. I think you understand. I was fair, right? She didn't think that, though, but she can take me to court, which is what you have to do, right? I mean, if you don't think the system's being fair to you, you take them to court. So, so hopefully she doesn't actually take me to court, or, you know, in other words, to Mr. Breinig, but it's not like that hasn't happened before. When kids, I don't want to bring Elliot up here again, but, you know, I mean, he got a D-. He felt that that was fundamentally unfair. So, sorry, Elliot. I don't mean to bring up a sensitive subject. Okay. So let's talk about what this actually means in the Fifth Amendment and from a criminal prosecution perspective. What this actually, I mean, if you think about, one of the examples that comes immediately to my mind is Brenton Butler, and it's because we all share this understanding of what happened in this film. In the case of Brenton Butler, what happened to this kid was that he was, well, the most obvious example was that he was beaten by the police, or his claim was that he was beaten, and the jury ultimately found that, you know, they felt it was likely that he was treated unfairly. That would be considered a violation of his due process rights. If you are abused by the police, that's not the system treating you fairly. That's the system beating a confession out of you. Yeah, that's not fair, right? That's not fundamental fairness. You know, due process can be a lot of different things. Due process is also the presumption of innocence. While being presumed innocent is something that people frequently say, like, you know, you're innocent until proven guilty. If you look through this book, you're going to find that phrase nowhere in this book. It doesn't say anywhere in the Constitution or the Bill of Rights that you're innocent until proven guilty. That is something that is part of the vernacular of our criminal justice system. We believe in that principle. And due process covers that. So the presumption of innocence that, you know, you go into a court, that's part of your right for due process, for the system to sort of be fair. Another really important thing that has been established based on due process is the right of people being held in custody to speak to their lawyers. You guys have all heard people say, like, you get one phone call from jail. I mean, I hope you've heard people on TV say this. I hope it's actually not been something you've experienced in real life. But that's a due process right. That is considered just fundamentally fair. That you could, call your lawyer or call your family or call someone to tell them where you are. That's part of due process, fundamental fairness. Also, people who are being held in custody, either convicted or people who are being held awaiting trial or based on some sort of, arrest. Those people have the right to have writing utensils, to have things to write with, to have paper to write on. The reason for that is because people need to be able to participate in their defense and being able to write things down, to jot down your memories, to sort of take down the things that are happening around you. I mean, all that is part of the fairness in the system. I mean, how fair would it be if, they locked you in a cell and wouldn't allow you to, talk to anybody, have access to any information? Now, I wonder if you guys are thinking about the film that I hope you all watched. I know some of you did because you mentioned it to me. On the inmates at Guantanamo. One of the arguments that has been made, from my perspective, most compellingly in favor of the people being held at Guantanamo is that their due process rights were violated on a number of occasions. Now, in the film you watched, they talk not just about due process rights. They talk about the rights of, that come a little later in the Eighth Amendment, to be free from cruel and unusual punishment and those kinds of things. But, even just the right of being held in detention without being able to talk to anybody. I mean, that is a due process right. Not being able to let your family know where you are. Is the system fundamentally fair? That is what's being argued in the courts. It's being argued in the courts right now. Some of it's been resolved, but it really is a major component to those cases. Prisoners having access to the courts, being able to send letters and appeal. I mean, you guys saw in the Gideon case, that's a due process right. That guy's ability to, write a brief, have access to legal documents and books to look things up. I mean, again, all part of a person's due process rights. Think of all the stuff that sort of filters in. Another thing that's really important about this component of the Fifth Amendment is, like I said, looking at the way that it's been used in other cases and or in other situations. And after the Civil War amendments were passed. Amendments 13 through 18 are essentially considered the Civil War amendments, and those are the amendments that did things like gave voting rights to African Americans and that declared that people, regardless of race or prior servitude, were citizens of the United States. I mean, like, these amendments were really critical. And the 14th Amendment is probably the one that is most often referenced, because the 14th Amendment is considered like the foundational civil rights amendment. In the 14th Amendment, they actually say, and I just want to read to you guys, the 14th Amendment's super long, so I'm not going to, because there's a lot of components to it. Amendment. Okay. So there's actually, the 14th Amendment has, if you, I don't know if you guys have that in your books. I don't think you do, because I think you just have the Bill of Rights. But there's 5 sections to the 14th Amendment. So if you look here, it's a lot. It actually goes on to the next page. The first section, though, is the one that I want to reference specifically. Section 1, Amendment 14. All persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and the state wherein they reside. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States. Listen to this. Nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. They had to restate it and put it in the 14th Amendment to make sure that people knew No citizen shall be denied life, or no person. No state shall deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. And then the last little bit here is nor deny any person within its jurisdiction the equal protections of the law. And that equal protections clause is also really, really important. So, this due process right is critical, so much so that it was actually repeatable. And I just want to tell you guys really quickly so that you know that 14th Amendment was actually published in 1868, post-Civil War. So, thank goodness for that, huh? One of the quotes that I want you to think about when you're thinking about, is something a due process right? Can the right to due process be applied? I want you to listen to this carefully, because this is what you need to think about when you think about due process. Is the procedure posed in violation of the canons of decency and fairness, which express the notions of justice of English-speaking peoples, even toward those charged with the most heinous offenses? If the answer is yes, then due process should be applied. Let me read this one more time. Is the procedure posed, or the activity, or the thing that has been done, or whatever it is you're talking about, is it in violation of those canons of decency and fairness which express the notions of justice of English-speaking peoples, even towards those charged with the most heinous offenses? In our system, one of the things that makes our system an amazing model, and a system that nations around the world emulate, and that has really become the foundation upon which a lot of modern legal systems have been built, has been the fact that, we put justice, and it's a very highly principled system that we have. And even people who are accused of doing heinous things, even people who we consider to be really bad people, those people, even them, they have the right. And we should be judged poorly if we do not give them the same kind of fairness as other people. And I often hear people say things like, well, they didn't give their victims that same right. And no, they didn't, of course. If you're somebody who is, an abuser, a rapist, there are people out there who are terrible people. But even those people are afforded fundamental fairness. Even those people are afforded due process. Not because we think that they deserve it, or not because we think that, the world would end if we locked up one more bad person, but because we say this system is so highly principled. Not only that, we also say it's so highly principled and it's so effective that we will give everyone the same treatment, that we will presume all people innocent, and that we will stand on the very noble shoulders of our system and say, if our system is applied fairly and correctly, then justice does prevail. And I guess that speaks to me as an American and as somebody who really believes in law. I believe in our system because we apply it to the most heinous of people. If you apply the laws to the people who are doing nothing wrong and are super sweet and innocent, then awesome. But don't pat yourself too firmly on the back, because those individuals didn't really need that fairness. They were already doing just fine. I think about the case that, of Taylor telling us about his experience with the police last summer. And he may have been doing something wrong, but even in that case, he is afforded by our system a fundamental fairness, a fair treatment. The police I mean, I think that's why it bothered me so much, and that story stuck with me, because fundamentally that's just not just for the police to behave that way. And the police officer knew that it wasn't just, and he knew better than that. He probably let his emotions get away from him in that moment. He was probably mad at you punk teenagers and what you guys, whatever you were doing. But, we believe in a system that is superior to emotion. I mean, that's why Aristotle said law is reason free from emotion. We can't look at a situation and say, oh, but he's a terrible person and he killed all those little kids, and or look at the Sandusky case. Excellent example. Sandusky absolutely, you guys, has to get the most fair trial. Because if we don't give the people who we are most convinced of their guilt, or whose crimes we believe to be the most heinous, a fair trial, then which of us out there should get a fair trial, right? I mean, then you have to prove you're innocent in order to earn a fair trial? No. Everybody has to get one. And everybody has to be treated fairly. Otherwise, you're going to have to prove you deserve fairness in order to get fairness. So it's something I just feel like I had to spend a little time focusing on with you guys, because I find this to be such a fundamental cornerstone, and I guarantee I'm going to ask you guys to talk about this on the final. I mean, I hate to throw in the old threat of the final, but I feel like I want you to understand the fact that I'm really spending time on this and this notion. And again, I'm going to read it. Those canons of decency and fairness which express the notions of justice of English-speaking peoples, even towards those charged with the most heinous offenses. This principle is key. And if you get nothing else from what I've said in this entire hour or so that I've been talking, if you include the previous lecture, I want you to get that, due process is this huge umbrella that is really about the heart of our system. So that's that. Okay. The last bit of the Fifth Amendment is about property seizure. And I'm going to just read the last bit for you. It says, nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation. This last bit, I think I'm going to abbreviate my typical comments on this. And I'm just going to tell you guys briefly so that I can, keep you moving here. The issue of property seizure is something that is really relevant. And it's been used time and time again. The courts have actually determined that the government can actually seize people's property as long as that property is being taken for the benefit for the greater good. So if you think about it that way. And but basically what this amendment says is that private property can't be taken for public use unless you're being justly compensated. Now, the word justly compensated is sort of the wiggle room there. Like, what is just compensation? But and that's something that has been argued over. Another component is, for what reasons can the public take or can the government take your private property? And you might be surprised, and I think people frequently are surprised, the reasons why the government can take your property. A public good can be something as simple as a better road. I have an uncle that owns a factory in Iowa, and the way that his factory is laid out, there is a highway that runs fairly close to where all of his semis come in and get their loads and then go out from his factory. Well, the state of Iowa wanted to expand that highway, and what it essentially would have done, and what it did do ultimately, is it took a huge portion of his parking lot where the semis came in and loaded from his factory. So basically what he had to do was he had to completely redesign his entire factory so that the goods that they were making in his factory, which by the way were pizzas, he manufactures frozen pizzas. So I have a very interesting family, frozen pizzas in Iowa, but okay, don't let that distract you. It was a huge cost to my uncle though. The fact that he was losing this, like, 100 yards, which was essentially how much it amounted to of his parking lot. That 100 yards of parking lot that he lost, it cost him, gosh, several $100,000 to completely redesign that whole factory. Well, but the state said, look, it's for the public good. We need to expand this highway. The highway is dangerous. It's too narrow. We need people and traffic to be able to move more freely. So here's what we'll do. We'll give you, I don't know how much they paid him. Maybe they paid him $80,000. We'll give you $80,000 for the land. We're out. And he fought it. He sued in court and he lost because what the court said was they're justly compensating you. They're giving you what your land is worth and it's for the public good. In Lodi, I wonder if you guys have heard about the electricity line that they're planning through Lodi. Has anybody noticed that big swath of forest between highway, like 113 and Riddle Road? Like if you are on 113 going towards Dane and you look to the right, you can see there's a big, looks like a razor, has gone right over that hilltop and taken those trees out, and they're putting an electrical line that's going up there. Well, that electrical line and the other lines that the company that's doing it, the authority that's, the electrical authority that's doing it are planning could potentially run straight through some private property. And in some of those cases, it might actually run straight through people's homes. That electrical company is actually pursuing putting that electrical line through people's homes. And I don't know if you guys have noticed, there's a farm, it's the Robbins Farm at the hill as you go out of town on your way to Dane, used to have a sign that said, decline the line. Now I think they have a sign that says, don't recall Walker, or we support Walker, or we love Walker, or something like that. I don't know. They have a pro Walker sign in their little front thing. But they had a decline the line sign because their house potentially could have been taken. Now the government, all the government has to do is pay them the going rate for their property. But of course that family's like, look, this farm's been in our family for generations. We don't want to give it up. But according to the Supreme Court, the government has the right to do that, which shocks a lot of people because they think like, what, private property? It's such a major cornerstone of American, like thinking in American culture, like our property, it's ours, it's my property. But as long as the government justly compensates you and can demonstrate that there is a public good, they can actually take your property. So there you go. All right. Well, I'm going to stop here, and I am going to wish you a happy weekend and tell you that I hope all goes well. And I guess we will see you. When will I see you? Thursday. I'll see you the last day before break. At which time I will, I'm sure, be learning all about all the wonderful things you guys have learned in the last few days with Mr. Borlander. So, okay, good. All right, guys. Thank you again, as always. You're a great class. I can tell you this now because you're not sitting, I mean, you're sitting here, but I'm not with you. And, but you guys really are a great class. And, I don't know, I've said this to you guys before, but this is my last time I'm ever going to teach this class. And it's really a joy that you guys are the ones that I get to take it from, so, or to teach it to, rather. So, okay, enough sweet stuff. Have a good weekend.